So, have you been into the Putnam house before? Or?
Many times.
Yeah, many times.
These two haven't, though.
Okay, all right. Well, you know that things back there are very old. Okay, and when we have youngsters, we want to be very careful about what we touch.
Of course.
Just kind of remember that. But otherwise, let's have a good time.
Yep.
We will.
Okay. So have you had a narrated tour of it then? So you've heard the stories and things?
Actually, I haven't had the narrated tour in a while.
Okay, you want to go ahead and go through that? Or I didn't know if the kids would
Sure,
enjoy
yeah.
that.
She is homeschooled. We would like her to learn as much.
Yeah.
All right, well, great.
Yeah. All right.
Well, let's talk a little bit and then give you some background history on Rufus Putnam and the house and how they got here. At the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, they signed the Treaty of Paris in 1783. And at the conclusion of that treaty, two major things came out of that. One was the obvious that the United States became a country. But the another important part of that treaty was that they were forced to give us a vast tract of land known as the Northwest Territory. And out of that territory would come the states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. So quite a few states, would come out of that. The soldiers were coming back from the war. They were coming back to poverty. They had given up everything, to fight that war. That war was a long, long time, 1775 to 1783.
Yeah.
That's 8 years of fighting. And they were basically in pretty much in poverty at that point. So they wanted paid, they wanted compensated. But the government didn't have any money either. They had fought the war. They were just getting organized, and trying to get their congresses together and stuff. And $1 back in those days was worth about 8 cents. So they couldn't pay them. So the best way to compensate the soldiers was by land grants. Okay, 100 acres per soldier. So that would do two things. One, it would get them back on their feet, with land, so they could farm and start to get their life back together. But also it would serve to broaden America, because the mountain range, the Alleghenies, was pretty much that to the Atlantic Ocean was all that was known. Anything west of that Allegheny Mountain was brand new virgin territory.
Right.
There was nothing there. No McDonald's, no Starbucks, no anything.
They said that the forests were like perfume, I've heard.
There were so many stories about what they call the Ohio country. Was getting back to New England, saying that this is perfume, and there was trees of all different types, animals galore, and just beautiful land to plant crops on, and that kind of thing. So, because they were going to give land grants to the soldiers, some of the soldiers, especially the officers, decided, well, let's pool our land grants together and form a company that we could buy a whole bunch of ground and then sell it and make a profit. And that's where these commercial companies started to form. And that's where the Ohio Company of Associates came about. They were a group of Revolutionary War officers that met in Boston and was able to purchase 1.5 million acres of ground, pretty much all southeast Ohio. And with that purchase, then they could come over here, settle, and then survey the land and sell it to new settlers and make money. So they needed a guy to be the first expedition leader to come down, and that was Rufus Putnam. They elected him to be the guy to do that. So he was able to get 47 of them in, and 48 of them then left Boston in December of 1787. Arrived here in Marietta then in April of 1788. And the reason they had to get here in the spring was because that's when the Ohio River was the highest. They could float their boats down the river. Otherwise, because in the summer or fall, they would drag bottom and couldn't get down here. And the other reason was it was also spring. That was planting season. That was time to plant crops. That meant food. Food meant I'm not going to starve that winter. So they had to have that done. So when they got here, they were met by some Indians and some Delaware tribes. And they said they were going to be friendly and get along just fine, and nobody's going to have a fuss about them being here. Rufus kind of thought, well, that's true today, but maybe not true tomorrow. So he decided once he built the land office, which was the very first building built, and that's where they did all the surveying for the land. Once that was built, he built what you see in front of you here, this Campus Martius. This was a fort for a stockade, if you will, to be protection, against any potential Native American problem. Now, this fort, where we're standing right now, is right here. So this is where we are standing. So when you were walking through the fort or through the museum, you're walking through the parade ground where that stood. Okay?
Right.
This house right here on the corner was where Rufus Putnam lived. That was his house. Okay. That little first chimney there. Okay.
Gotcha.
If you turn around behind you, that's his house.
Okay.
And it's never been moved. That's exactly where it was in 1790 when he lived here. So that was that corner house. This block house then out here on the corner sat out here on 2nd Street.
Okay.
Okay. And then you've been his house, and then more houses going down toward Muskingum River to a block house down there. And then up the river, houses to another block house, and then houses back down towards 2nd Street to a block house, and then back down where we're standing here. So that square made up the fort.
Very cool. Question.
Yeah.
Do they have any markers
I think
for
they
the other
do
corners?
on the corners.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can find those. I think they did.
I've never
they're
seen
buried,
those.
but you have to dig them up now. But they do have them marked out.
Okay.
I don't know if they've actually dug up any
Right.
deeper than that, to find some of the foundations of other houses.
So how did they tear down the house?
How did they tear them down?
Yeah.
Well, very carefully, because they kept the wood safe and used it again. So they would tear the house down and then move the house and then rebuild it using the same wood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
really pretty.
on the same wood.
Same wood, you're right.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna go there.
So this whole thing called Campus Martius was only 60 yards by 60 yards square. Just a little over half a football field, so it's not that big. It looks big when you look at it here. About 400 people could live in that, so you can imagine how crowded it would have been, with that kind of, what I call the first condominium, you better like your neighbor, because it's pretty close quarters. This was never attacked by Indians, though. It's just too strong of a fortification. But Indian wars did develop over the 1791 to 1795 time frame. The Indians kept on getting pushed further away, and taking their food sources away and that kind of thing. Just kind of ticked them off pretty much. And that pretty much started the Indian Wars. And finally, they had to send an army out under Mad Anthony Wayne. You've heard that name maybe in history. They had a big battle up in northern Ohio called the Battle of Fallen Timbers, where they defeated a bunch of the Native Americans there, and they had to sign the Peace Treaty of Greenville, and that ended in hostilities here in the southeast Ohio. Kind of pushed all the Native Indians up above I-70, up around Akron and Cleveland, and kept this part of the state pretty much safe from Indian attack. So the guys that owned these houses, they just tore them down and moved them and built them again back up on their house, on their property. Rufus liked where he lived, so he just stayed there, like I say, behind you.
And guess what?
He bought this blockhouse, had it torn down, and had an addition built to his house. So what you're standing in is the timbers of that blockhouse.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Okay?
Very nice.
These are 234-year-old timbers,
And guess
all
what?
hand done. They had no sawmill here, so they used what they call saw pits, where they would dig a big hole in the ground. Then they chop the tree down over that pit. Then a guy would get down below and above and saw these timbers out by hand.
Okay.
Where's all the people?
So pretty
You
tough
guys are
wood, pretty tough job.
Wow.
Far away in the house.
What's that?
And where's all the people far away in the house?
Where's all the people? They're pretty old if they're still hanging around. Huh?
Yeah, and we're playing the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, they didn't need this, so they tore it down and they just moved their houses out.
And the George Washington.
Let me listen
Okay,
to it.
let's head on down this way.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, hold my hand.
Okay. Let's go.
This way. This way.
Where are we going?
We're going down this step here.
We're going
Down this way.
Almost 6?
I'm
You're 6 already. All right.
Oh,
You
the
look
guy
like you're
accidentally called you
maybe
5.
2.5. Does that sound right?
Wait, what did you say? He's
He's
4.
4. Oh my goodness. Okay.
I used
I-
to be 4, but now I'm 5.
I used to be 4 too, but
Me.
that's last century. So. All right. So, what country was instrumental in helping us win the Revolutionary War?
Marietta.
Remember your history a little bit? Lafayette.
France.
France.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I was going to say France, and I didn't want to be wrong.
It was France. And who was Queen of
Down.
France during that time?
Just like your car.
That would be
She lost her head later
Marie
on.
Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette. Very good. Okay. Marietta was named after Marie Antoinette. Okay. And she was so excited about that, very happy that we would use her name to name Marietta, that she had a bell made in Paris in 1790 and sent over by ship. And this is the bell that was made by Marie Antoinette. And it used to hang in one of those blockhouses that became the church and school, here in Marietta in 1791-92 time frame. Okay, so still rings pretty good. You hear it ring. That's a school bell. Time for school.
Oh, look, there's a basement.
That's right. It's a basement. So this is a kind of a opening of his house here, 3-story structure, which was very unusual. But you've got to remember, Rufus was the superintendent of the Ohio Company, a retired general. He was a rich guy in town, so he could afford a big 3-story structure like this. Most of the settlers that were here early in 1790 just had a 1-story structure with the kind of dirt floors, and stuff. But he was a rich guy, so.
Guys,
They didn't build log cabins like you would have thought, in the early 1700s like that. They did what they called plank homes, plank houses. New England carpenters knew how to build regular planked siding. And they used what they call a mortise. This is a mortise. And then into that would be a board with a called a tenon, and then a wooden peg would hold that in place. So mortise, tenon, peg system was how they built their homes. You can see an example of that. That would have gone into this mortise, and then that peg holding the board in.
are you taking a
Here's
video?
another one, and a couple more you can see. So that's how they built their houses. The brickwork was right here in Marietta. This is original brick to his home. It was made just out of the clay soil right here in Marietta. There were no brick factories here. They just used kilns to mold the bricks. And he had a full-size basement, like the young lady said here. Okay. Complete basement to his house, which is again very unusual because nobody could afford that.
Right.
He could do that because he was again the rich guy in town. But in there he would store fruits and vegetables, and dried things, and barrels of this or that. You can look in there and see that this is the original stonework to the basement and the
I'm
steps.
afraid if I will fall there.
Yeah, we can't go down. So just look. The concrete floor, of course, has been added for foundation purposes, but that would have been dirt floor at the time.
That looks scary because that has cobwebs.
I know. I don't think I want to go down in there.
What's the Putnam family now?
I cannot tell you anything
Okay.
about what might be in there. There's probably all kinds of stuff stored in there.
Gotcha.
The steps look steep, but that would have come all the way out here, so there would have been, more of a
That's cool.
less steep entry point to it.
Okay, I think they used a
Little hidden
ladder.
treasures in there.
To this side, and you can see that the planking that's missing there has been put on here to show you. So this would have been the planks on the outside. This would have been then the outside of that fort, that wall that went
Right.
all the way around. Okay, so out here would have stood that big blockhouse, and then his house would have been here, and then another house next to his, another house down to a blockhouse 60 yards down, making the wall of that fort. Okay. So Rufus required everybody to build this wall first, all the way around, all 60 yards square, for protection. Then they could go back in and build their house. And again, they had the mortises here, and then into that would have been the tongue with the pegs going in. And in order to know what board went where, you see they etched in Roman numerals into the boards
Oh, okay. That's cool.
to know that this board went to that mortise. Okay, so that if they wanted to take the house down and move it, they could reconstruct the house, with the proper
Yeah.
order. Because they were all hand done. It wouldn't fit anyplace else. Yellow poplar was the wood,
Yeah, when did you say?
4 inches thick by 12 inches up to 18 feet. So an arrow, you know, or a lance, or even a musket ball is just not going to go through that. It's just really, really tough. He had shutters added to his house during the Indian Wars for protection, as well as to be a little warmer in the wintertime, you know, when it's cold. Most people, again, did not have that. And Rufus also added glass to his house. This was not originally here in 1790 when it was built, but he lived here until 1824, and by the 1800s, there was river traffic and commerce from Pittsburgh, and you could buy nails and paint and glass and stuff. So that was added to his house later. The doorway here was not originally here because this was a wall, remember? But once the Indian Wars were over, then he added the doorway to come in and out. But pretty impressive house if you think about this being the very first thing.
Yeah, the preservation is really impressive.
It's just amazing that it could be preserved and even built by hand in 1790. I mean, think about that. There was nothing here, just trees. That was it. And yet he could construct this all with hand tools.
Oh yeah.
All the other settlers just had pegs, you know, on the wall to hang their clothes on. But he had 4 closets. Yeah, this is the original hardware. This doorknob and door is all what was here when they lived here. Yeah. In the corner, you see a china cabinet. That was the oldest piece of furniture in the state of Ohio. Built right here in Marietta in 1788 by a guy named Jonathan Sprague, who was a carpenter and a shipbuilder. He actually built ships here in Marietta. Matter of fact, Marietta had a lot of shipbuilding. I don't know if you knew that or not, but they had
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 2 or 3 shipbuilding yards here that built sailing ships.
Oh wow.
That would actually go on down the Ohio River, down to Mississippi, out in the Gulf of Mexico, and out they would go. And that was a big trade here in Marietta until steamboats came about and took away the sailing ships. But anyway, that's made out of black walnut, and a good example of just how good they could build things in that early time frame. Cello was here in the corner because there was a wedding here in this room in 1803. The Putnams had a servant girl that worked with them named Sarah Corner, and she was not a slave because slavery was prohibited, you know, in the Northwest Territory. She was just a helper, but she fell in love with a guy named James Flagg, and they were married in this room in 1803. And one of the Flagg family members played the cello here, so that's kind of why it's set in the corner there. Any questions on the part, or you want to ask?
Do you have any questions? Did George Washington ever, by chance, eat in here?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
Okay.
As far as I know, he did a lot of surveying, you know, around the area here.
Right.
But I don't believe he was ever in.
Okay. I didn't know if he'd ever been invited to this building or not.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think at that point he was pretty much president, and you know, gets pretty well tied up with things.
Oh yeah.
But there were quite a few. Well, Lafayette was here in Marietta, and Manasseh Cutler, if you know Manasseh Cutler, you know, Athens, Ohio, at OU, they founded OU, and Cutler Hall up there in Athens. So we have a lot of famous people. Alrighty, heading off here to the kitchen.
Here we go.
Wish it was a little more light for you, to see a little better, but.
There's a hair right there.
Well,
They don't come on though.
they don't work, I'm afraid. Anyway, fireplace is all original again, mantle and brick, and some of the utensils they use for cooking. This was their toaster, which there's a replica of it here, where they would put bread in the toaster and then put it into the fire on one side and then flip it and then toast the other side.
Cool.
And that's the original one there. They had what they call a reflector oven, and they would put inside here a piece of meat on a spindle, and then close it down, and then shove that back into the fire, and the heat would rotate around and cook the meat. It wasn't like a rotisserie like we think of now we see in stores. It would just stay still, but the heat would rotate
Right.
and cook it. They had an oven to bake pies or cakes or bread, and they would put back in the back here, then the oven inside here wood and then that wood would burn and then get this brick all radiating heat. And once it was nice and hot, they would stick their arm in there, and if they could keep their arm in for about 8 seconds without burning themselves, they knew it was the right temperature. I think I would have found a better way of doing that than that. That doesn't sound too cool to me. Then once they got it the right temperature, they would scrape the ashes here into an ash pit down below. Then this was called a peel, where they would put their bread in or cake or pie onto that peel and put it back into the oven and close it up, and they would make their bread or cake or pie. So pretty cool way, like the first pizza oven.
Right.
Yeah.
So did they ever have birthdays?
I bet they did. They had 9 kids. They probably had a lot of birthdays.
Guys,
All right, guys, what's this? I'm going to give you a quiz. What is that?
that's a cup.
I can't even see it.
I know.
Oh, do you mind if I have the flashlight?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Is that a candle?
Not a candle. It's something to cook with.
It looks
Something you'd use in cooking, maybe.
Oh, is that?
Oh, wait.
I'll let you.
Something that you'd put maybe in your coffee. You might put it in your tea. You might use it in making a cake.
I think it's cups or something.
Is that starch or butter?
Well,
Is it a tool?
it's edible.
It's a-
You would take it and pinch it off and grind it down into powder.
Wow.
And
Salt?
put it- Yeah, I thought,
Okay.
That's what I thought was salt. I was wrong too. Sugar.
Hey,
Oh,
let's
yeah,
go.
I was
Yeah.
close.
It's a sugar cone. I've never heard of that until I started doing this tour stuff.
I thought it was cups.
It's sugar.
It's a sugar cone. It came all the way from Jamaica, okay, which is a big island down in the Caribbean, and it had to be shipped up to the East Coast and then on a wagon and brought clear out here. So you can imagine the cost of something like that to get there in his old days. That, they said, was about $7 for a sugar cone. The average salary for a settler was about $3 a month.
Oof.
So you can imagine just getting one cone, you're using 2.5 months of your salary. So very few people could afford that. It was just, again, Putnam who could do that. Most of the guys that just wanted sweeteners would get it from a honey bee type comb. But they had spices. They would grow spices and dry them, hang them like that until they dried out. They then grind them down into the powder. And this was a spice rack that they would use to put their spices in.
Cool.
They had what they call a brine bowl. This is a brine bowl. They would put water in there and then salt and then strips of meat down in there to soak up.
What is that thing?
That's a paddle just to kind of keep the salt moving across the meat. They had a rolling pin.
I thought they had some.
Probably use it for other things.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
It was
And-
probably very useful.
Very useful tool, I imagine. And they had choppers to chop vegetables and slice meat and that kind of thing. These were probably something else at some point. This might have been a plow, for example, that broke.
Oh,
And when
okay.
the plow broke, they took it to a blacksmith and said, hey, what can you do with this? I can't use it as a plow. He said, well, I'm not going to throw it away. We're going to make something good. So they make choppers out of those things. They had oil lamps. This is called a Betty lamp. Didn't use those very much in Marietta here because of the poor quality of oil. Most good oil lamp came from whale blubber, which is, you don't find many whales in the Ohio River, so
Right.
you couldn't get good oil. They would use fish oil or maybe fat renderings off of an animal they had killed. And it would smoke and smell, and it just wasn't very pleasant, so they didn't use that very much. Butter churn in the corner over here, which is for butter. That's made out of a sycamore tree, this one big sycamore log. And of course, that's how they churn their butter. They had a table here, which was again a original Putnam piece. You see that string on it. That was here when they lived here. A chair to sit on, but then when they had company, it was on wheels. They would slide it out, and this would slide down to become a table. So it would become an extra table for them. But they can scoot it back out of the way.
Very cool.
Be used as a chair if they wanted it. That's pretty much the kitchen. Some of the utensils are implements that Rufus required every male settler to bring with them when they came down from New England. A gun, of course, a musket. This is a .69 caliber French musket.
Is that a cat laser?
and then a powder horn, a shot and wad bag, a saber and hat. He kept them trained up pretty much all the time in case of any kind of Indian incursions, you know, or trouble. That's the kitchen pretty much. Any questions you want to ask?
So, where did these things come from?
Baby, of course. And once the baby outgrew the crib, then they would go to the trundle bed on the side here, which is in this case a double that would slide under the bed, then slide out. These would be for the tweeners, size-wise. And then, of course, graduate to the full-size bed there when they got older enough.
It feels very
They had bed warmers, which would have been used like they put stones in there and then put it in the fireplace to heat the stones up. And then they would slide that under the bed and radiate heat, you know, up through the straw to make them a little warmer, you know, in the wintertime. Would have been make me a little nervous to think I was sleeping on straw
Oh, yeah. Right.
with hot stones underneath me there. I thought, I want to sleep on that or not.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's
Yeah, there's gotta
another
be, though.
little loft.
A couple more bedrooms there you can take a look at if you want to.
See?
I bet this was the mom and dad's bed.
No, that was the one
We
we
really
just saw.
don't know who slept where, but we think this might have been more of the private bedroom for Rufus and Persis, but again, that's just speculation.
Yes, so I can get.
The piece on the wall here, this mirror, was actually a piece from the War of 1812. Remember the wedding we talked about down in the parlor? James Flagg was a captain in the militia during the War of 1812. And on his way home to Marietta, back with his wife Sarah, he purchased this mirror to bring back. So, alrighty.
Let's
Get that downstairs. Here, you just want to look in the other bedroom. There you go. Of course. It's too dark to see much in here today, I'm afraid.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's a cool bed.
Oh,
Look at that one.
Oh, cool.
it's a treasure
Hey,
chest.
hey.
Yeah.
Not on the bed.
And there's another.
Yeah, the canopy there is it really shouldn't be there, frankly. It is not a.
Oh, it's not original.
It's original, but it's not a pioneer piece.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to go inside the square that they
Can't go in, I don't think. I believe it's locked. Yep. Let's knock. Hello. Yeah.